literally changed. People saw me, they're like, what happened to you? Like, why are you better than you were?
You're glowing.
I was glowing, literally. My buddy Adam, he's like, you look different. Like, what happened? Tell me everything. And I told him. So that was unbelievable. Every day, we are blessed to interact with some of Colorado's most interesting people. On this podcast, Judaism with Altitude, we share their fascinating stories with you. And
we have a great time. Hello, welcome to our next podcast episode. And we actually have been having a really hard time getting started. Not just because Danny was in Israel for a little while, but actually just went to Trader Joe's. So a little public service announcement. Whether you like Trader Joe's or you're not so into Trader Joe's yet, maybe you don't know what to buy there. We have this little stash next to us to show you some amazing things that I just got today. And I take a bite and then he takes a bite and I'm like, we can't start because we're busy eating. What are you eating?
We tried to start this podcast now for 5 minutes, but one of us was eating something. I'm actually having some of these delicious organic Italian green Bella di Saraghinola olives, which has a hechsher from Europe, from Italy. You called the CRC, right?
Yeah, I asked them about the EUK, and they said it's good. So here we are, kosher olives from Italy through Trader Joe's. Okay, just some other things we got. We like pickles. These are in the fridge section near the tofu, because everyone knows where the tofu is, right? Probably not, but yeah, great kosher pickles.
I should point out Trader Joe's is not yet an official sponsor of our podcast, but if anyone out there from Trader Joe's is listening, you should be aware we're pitching your products pretty good, and we're happy to take sponsors.
I'm a good spender there. Really. These are amazing. Our kids love them, and we eat them too. They're gluten-free. And what's nice about these is...
What are they, for those not watching?
Okay, sorry. These are rolled corn tortilla chips, chili and lime flavored. So they're like a little sour. There's a not kosher version of these. I don't remember what they're called. Maybe Takis or something like that. But when you buy it at Trader Joe's, there's no food coloring, artificial ingredients. So when I'm getting snacks like this, I way rather get them at Trader Joe's than anywhere else because I know it's less processed. There's less junk in it. So speaking of junk, this is not junk. This is amazing. Ready for this? Dark chocolate almond butter filled pretzel nuggets. Now, not everyone is into this kind of thing. But if you like almond butter and dark chocolate, it does not get better than this. It's salty and sweet and crunchy. Oh, so good. Okay, while we're in the sweets, if that's not your thing, maybe this would be your thing, milk chocolate covered pretzels. They also have dark chocolate, but I got this for the milk chocolate eaters in the house. Here's something cool. Now, I made these the other day. They're gluten-free chocolate chunk cookie dough. Ready to bake. You just put it on the pan. I made these the other day, and I got comments from some of the pickiest eaters, including in my family, that these are the best cookies ever. So they're OU parv, which means you can eat them with your meat, with your deli sandwich or your chicken or whatever else. Okay, and then this is a new find a friend told me about. It's hard to find kosher cheeses in different places. It's not often carried. And I remember hearing about 2 flavors. I only found one of them today at the store, but sliced black truffle Monterey Jack cheese. It has an OK here, the kosher symbol with a D telling you, yes, this is dairy.
We don't really know what black truffle is, but it sounds nice and fancy, so we like it.
Yeah.
If anyone knows what black truffle is, please feel free to comment, send us a message, comment, because we're curious to learn. We want to learn more.
You tried this also, yeah?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
It was good?
Great.
Awesome. Okay, at some point I need to get all this back in the fridge.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so our main topic for today, which we'll get into now, is really Danny's Israel trip. Wow, what an experience. Do you want to just explain, maybe while I put this in the fridge, you could just explain what was the trip you went on? What's the premise? Who's it for?
Sure. Before I do that, and before you step away,
yeah.
2 things. First of all, For those watching, I'm curious also. My beard is coming in pretty gnarly, and I don't know if it's ever been this long. And I'm curious if I should keep it going through the 3 weeks. There's a 3 week period of mourning coming up on the Jewish calendar starting on Tuesday of this coming week. And from those 3 weeks, we don't shave. So I need to come to a decision
Men
soon.
don't shave their beards.
Sorry, men don't shave their beards. Thank you. Or get haircuts. So I need to figure out if I'm going to let it go those 3 weeks or I'm going to trim it. What are your thoughts?
I'm kind of undecided right now. Like,
Undecided.
I'm okay with it where it's at.
So if wife's
I don't
okay with it,
know
I should be
what
okay with it,
3
right?
weeks will do for it.
Maybe we should find out. Okay. Second thing is that I want you here for this part, and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
So I went away on a trip to Israel for about 12 days. 7 days was volunteering. I guess the part I want you for is basically I went away for 12 days. My wife is really pregnant. Thank God you're in your last month. And someone asked me, I forgot who, but they're like, tell me about that conversation you had with your wife about letting you go to Israel, like now. So I thought about it. I was like, well, the conversation was something like this. Sweetie pie, there's an opportunity to go to Israel now with some people from our organization here in Denver. I think it would be great. And then she responded to me and she said, great, you should go. That was it. That was the conversation. So big shout out to my Ashes Chayil here. Super supportive, so blessed. And that was the conversation. But yeah, you could go
I'm just
bring the
glad
trees away and
you
stuff.
got home before we had the baby.
Yeah, Sarah
that was in the back of my mind. Just who am I going to
nervous.
call? Who am I going to call to come with me if you're in Israel?
Yeah.
But we made it through.
Made it through, thank God. So
yeah,
appreciate you. So while you put all those goodies away, I'll share a little more about the trip. So through Birthright, after October, Birthright opened up opportunities for people to volunteer in Israel. You know, a lot of people wanted to go to Israel to somehow contribute some way. So many of us in the diaspora feel just utterly helpless. Well, our loved ones are in Israel, are defending the country from murderous terrorists. And here we are, outside the land of Israel and just wondering what we can do. So Birthright basically came up with an opportunity for people ages 20 to 40 to go to Israel to volunteer. It's a volunteer trip, 7-day trip. You're eligible even if you did Birthright, and you're eligible if you're between ages 20 and 40. And the idea is that it's unlike a Birthright trip in which you're, fully scheduled every second of every hour of every day. This trip is like volunteering seriously in the mornings, and then you have a whole lot of free time in the afternoons. And essentially went a few days early to spend Shabbos with my cousins who were back from Gaza and my aunt and uncle. And I spent Shabbos with them, hung out with my sister a little bit, and then started the program in which we volunteered for 7 days. The volunteering included packing packages in a warehouse for families affected by October 7th, as well as just poor people in Israel. And then for 3 days, we did some farming, which we uprooted rotten tomato vines and picked some cucumbers and helped some folks in some really, really hot greenhouses there. And then we spent some time down south at the Nova site, very powerful experience. And it was, I'd say, one of the most enriching trips to Israel I've had that I can remember.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a little background of the trip.
Who else was on your trip? So there's a group from Denver. Like, how did it work?
Yeah, so there were 8 of us from Denver, and we joined a larger group that was run by Israel Free Spirit, OU Israel Free Spirit Birthright, and about 50 of us in all. So there were about 42 other people, completely diverse array of people from all over the country, from all kinds of religious backgrounds and personalities and political beliefs and all kinds of stuff. But all 50 of us basically went to Israel, who's actively involved in a war, who's getting rockets fired at it every day. And therefore, it was like a real special connection that we had as a group.
Wow.
All of us from so many diverse perspectives.
That's so cool. You put everyone on a bus together, and especially in the middle of a war. Tell us more about that. What was it like being there in the middle of the war? Was it what you expected? Did you feel safe?
Yeah. It's really interesting because in all the years that we've even lived in Israel, I don't believe we were ever there during an active war. For those who don't know, we've lived in Israel for 2.5 years, 3 years. Once while I was in college for 6 months, and you were there for a year in seminary, and then we were married there for 2 years, and there was never a war going on then.
Even in 05, 06, was that right after like an intifada or something? I remember things were a little.
So the intifada had been winding down. It was essentially over by the time we got there for that gap year between high school and college. So we were a little nervous to go on buses back then and such.
Dated.
But now we're dating ourselves. Yeah. I just had my birthday. You see the gray coming in the beard, getting older. But so it was very powerful to be there during the time of a war. One of the main things I noticed, honestly, was how empty it was from tourists specifically. Wow. So, like in the old city, you'd walk around. Usually, you can't hardly move. You're waiting if you're trying to get, Holy Bagel. Shout out Holy Bagel, the best iced coffee in Israel. If you're trying to get a Holy Bagel in the old city, you're waiting in line. You're trying to get a shawarma, you're waiting in line because there's so many people from all over the world of all different faiths. But now tourism is down miserably, and you feel it, especially in the old city. So that was one thing I noticed. There's definitely a heaviness in the air. You kind of feel it. Everyone has been affected by it, whether they know people have been taken hostage, they know people have been killed on October 7th, they know people who fell heroically in battle and war in Gaza. Everyone knows someone. And my first Shabbos there, we were walking from Shul, and we saw an Anglo man approaching us, and the guy who was approaching us had lost a son in Gaza. So it's everywhere, every community, everywhere, people feel it. But at the same time, part of the Jewish spirit is that people carry on, and they plow forward, and they continue living, and they celebrate and sanctify life. And we went out every night, almost every night. One thing I learned is that soccer is interesting after 5 L'chaims. The Euro Cup was playing. For those who don't know, that's the Europeans when they play a soccer tournament with each other. Big deal in Europe, in Israel. And we went out almost every night, and there were Israelis out also, drinking, dancing, celebrating, because we really do sanctify life. And that was very powerful to see that. It felt better being in Israel at a time of war than it feels to be in America right now, where everywhere I went in Israel, I saw return hostage signs, missing person signs, return the hostages. Everywhere we go, we see graffiti, bring Hirsch home. And it was nice because no one there tore down those posters. Like, that struck me. I'm like, people see that poster and no one's tearing it down.
Yeah.
And that was nice. Whereas here, it's like sick people who would never tear down a poster of a missing puppy, tear down posters of people snatched from their homes against their will. So it was special to be there, and I felt understood. I felt connected to the people and understood. They understood me. I understood them. And of course, there's division there and people disagree about stuff. But there's a feeling of acceptance and understanding that a Jew has there right now that he doesn't have anywhere else in the world at this moment.
Yeah. It sounds like, just the way people deal with, I don't know, with tragedy, with hardship, there's just more resiliency there from what you're saying. Like, there's resiliency, and then also, I don't know, just like an understanding that sometimes this is the reality, and we don't become victims from it. We carry on, we use it, and we join together as much as we can. Quoting Lori Palatnik, I just heard her today, interviewed on another great podcast for Jewish women, saying we're one big dysfunctional family. And like, I don't know, that sounds like kind of what family. You saw, like, like we're all in it together.
Right. Well, at the end of the day, care about each other, love each other. Yes, there's disagreements like in any family. Every family has like the crazy uncle or whatever it is, but like we're family. Yeah. And it was very clear while there in Israel.
That reminds me, I was just talking to a friend, shout out to Emma, who's just visiting after making Aliyah. and she was saying how friends said, like, could we, like she's living in Israel, but it's kind of like topic that people don't know. Like, can I ask you about it? Is it too triggering? And she's like, no, absolutely. Like, this is my daily life in Israel. Like, of course you can ask me about it. It's just like, it's so different. It's a different way of seeing things, of like, you're living with a certain reality as opposed to tiptoeing around things in order to live your daily life. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like embracing it versus trying to just forget about it and live despite it.
Right. People are right. They're not running away from reality, and they're living in reality and embracing it and doing the best they can with it.
Right.
Right. Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was, like, I don't know, what was your highlight? Highlight in what sense?
Yeah.
Maybe if you break into different categories.
Yeah. There's, like I said before, like the feeling that came to mind is like rich. It was the most rich experience I think I've had there as a visitor in a very long time, because it really checks so many boxes of things that were great and were important to me.
Let's start with the food.
Food. Okay. So food, it was interesting.
That's the American in me.
One of the first things I ate there
Yeah.
was a falafel at our favorite falafel place. But big shout out to, this is Judaism with altitude. So here at altitude in Colorado, we have two terrific falafel places, Ida Pita and Asli, both of whom's falafel I think I actually liked more than the one I had in Israel, which was my favorite one in Israel. So that was the last falafel I got in Israel. I'm like, I don't need falafel here because I got that in America.
That's just like that was our falafel place. Like, that was where when we got to town, like, that was where we went once we left our little neighborhood, and we could, like, that was a place to get falafel.
Yeah.
What is different about it? Like, I don't know. Can you put your finger on why you like the one here better?
It was more flavorful to me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Here's more flavorful. It's weird.
Despite the delicious cucumbers and tomatoes there.
Yeah. Despite all that. It's crazy.
You mentioned a watermelon you ate there. Can you tell us more about that?
It's delicious watermelon.
Yeah.
While we were volunteering in a warehouse, they brought us some watermelon, and like, it just tastes different there. And like a lot of people, like a lot of Jews, like are uneasy about the watermelon because the watermelon has been hijacked as a symbol of.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's been hijacked as a symbol of Palestinian aspiration for a one-state solution, a Palestinian state devoid of any Jews, because the colors of the watermelon are the colors of the Palestinian flag and whatnot, and the shape of a wedge of a watermelon kind of looks like the shape of Israel. So
Thanks for explaining that, because I totally missed that.
Yeah, it's easy to miss, but I refuse to cancel the watermelon. I refuse to let them take the watermelon from me because it is truly such a delicious piece of food.
What a gift to have watermelons, in the summertime.
Tremendous.
You buy this big fruit. Like, berries and like little things are great, but like to get like one big, like what a God-given gift.
Tremendous. Really. Yeah. Every bite, it's incredible. So that was great, but more great than the watermelon was one evening. So we went every day. We went pretty early to the bus station or the bus stop to get our bus to go volunteering. Right, we were scattered in 3 different apartment complexes within maybe a mile or 2 radius of each other. So we met up at like a bus stop every morning, very early. Right, sometimes at 6 a.m. It's kind of warm here, so Sarah's just using a book I bought one of my kids.
Really cute.
It's a Yiddish book of like songs for kids who get upsharons, their 30-year birthday. 77 degrees here in the studio, so it's nice and warm. But what was I going? Oh, so every morning we would get on the bus early, 6 a.m. And then I have to say the highlights, which I didn't do yet. But so we get on the buses at 6 a.m. and we had to bring lunch with us because at these farms, there's really nowhere to go get food. Like, you're in the middle of nowhere. So I went out one evening in search of like a place to buy a sandwich that I could just put in my backpack and bring the next morning. But as I was going out of my apartment, I pulled a left on Agrippas. So I lived, if anyone knows Agrippas, That's like you go through the Shuk and then you're on Agrippas.
It's like parallel to Yafo.
Yeah.
That means anything.
And if you continue down, you get to Nachlaot. So when I came out of Nachlaot, I pulled to the left on Agrippas towards like the bus station area. And when I was there, I just snooped around looking for a place to get a sandwich. I saw a place called Enchilada, and I looked, and I think it was Mahadran. It was like the best kosher certificate. And I looked, and it was dairy, and it was closed at that moment. But
One
I'm like,
win after another.
I'm like, as soon as I get back here and they're open, I'm eating this. Because before I started keeping kosher as a young boy, like Mexican food was like my life, like literally a big, huge part of my life. And sure enough, the next day, after a rough day uprooting rotten tomato plants, this place was open and I ate it, and I literally changed. People saw me, they're like, what happened to you? Like, why are you better than you were?
You're glowing.
I was glowing, literally. My buddy Adam, shout out to Adam, he's not my BFF, E, different Adam, but he's like, you look different. Like, what happened? Tell me everything. And I told him, and I brought him there the next day too. So that was unbelievable. Just the legit, authentic enchilada in mole sauce and in a green sauce, and I got a quesadilla like I never had before. It was unbelievable. So shout out. I wrote a Google review. You should all go on Google, check it out. I don't know if I told you this, Sarah, but I said I'm considering Aliyah once again. I think we need to maybe have a conversation after this podcast. But it was tremendous. I said the trip was worth coming just for that. But
yes. Something I didn't mention to you about that before, which I just found so interesting. I mean, I know it's different, and I'm not taking this personal, but like mole is something that we had once somewhere. A family friend, remember, made us.
Yeah.
And it was delicious, and there's chocolate in it. And I remember, like, you just didn't like the idea that there was like, no matter how it tasted, it was delicious. And I made it, but like, you could not wrap your head around that, like, there should be chocolate in it. Right. And it's just so cool. Now you're a changed person.
We grow up.
Embrace it.
We grow up. We mature. And I was young, and I've matured. I've aged quite a bit. And new perspective. And the reality is, like, I like the concept now more than the actual taste. Like the concept of mole, it sounds very authentic. I don't even know quite everything it is. Yeah. But the next time I went, I got the green sauce only, not mole.
Oh, you liked the green sauce better.
Yeah.
What was the green sauce?
Some delicious, peppery, spicy sauce. It was great. But the trip, honestly, it was super fulfilling in like every sense, right? Obviously, in the eating sense. I went to Ma'afeh Yehuda, which is the Freedom Bakery, the French bakery on King George Street. The pie chocolat, absolutely delicious. You have to have it. It's like unbelievable, so good. But beyond the food is just the spiritual aspect of being there, right? It's like you feel it as soon as you step, you land. Right, the plane lands in Israel, like you feel different. Like you feel the air. It's not describable in words. If you never felt it before, I can't really describe it to you. But getting off the airplane, walking the steps in the airport, eventually getting into Jerusalem and taking steps in the city of Jerusalem, it's like so spiritually reinvigorating. And when I went to the Western Wall, I was able to go, I think, 4 times on this trip, in 12 days. And 2 of those times were Vasikin. I was able to pray as the sun rose in the morning. At 5:40, the sun came up. And so what people do, it's like a thing. People go get at the wall at 5 a.m. so that they can get to that part of the prayer service when the sun rises. They get into their silent, meditative Shemona Esrei, their Amidah. And what blew me away is, for one, how many people are outside in the dark streets at 4:30 in the morning trying to catch a bus to the old city.
Not like in Denver, where the only people outside at 4:30 are like finishing up their crimes for the night.
Right. Not like that, no. And when we got off the bus at 5 a.m., there were scores, right? 30, 40 women getting on the bus from the Kotel. Like, they were there all night, like praying for the Jewish people and the soldiers and all of us. And they were there all night. And now they're getting on the bus at 5 a.m. from the Western Wall.
The only thing I can think of, like when you tell me that, is just these are stories that we hear about of people, of great people from previous generations, from 100 years ago, 200 years ago, that like no one in our day and age is like that. Like, I mean, we don't look around and it's not like, maybe people are doing it that we don't know about, but it's not like a thing in the same way that in Israel, like it's really just a different.
It's a different reality. It's a different life. People live different there. And it reminds us of like we're actually capable of. Like it really, it's inspiring. It's like, no, we don't have to settle for less. Like we can be great. Like these are great people. And like we can do that too. Like I don't know why they're any different from us. Like we could do that too. Maybe here in America we have more distractions and we have, life is different, but we should aspire for that greatness also.
I want to go back to what you said for a minute, just like that feeling when you land and being on the airplane, because I think that type of thing, like, it's incredible, but it's also like kind of like a disclaimer, like it's what to talk about, right? Like not everyone always has that feeling, and it's really, I think on the one hand it takes some openness to it, and on the other hand, like it's not about you. Like you might go, like, right, you might go to the Western Wall and you might feel something and you might not feel something, and there's definitely something going on there. I heard recently I read a Mishpacha. Remember I was telling you this, that in some way the souls, some Kabbalistic rabbi was saying the souls of like our forefathers and our foremothers, Abraham, Sarah, like are at the Kotel, or at the Western Wall on Friday nights, like a Shabbos is coming in. And there's like a spiritual potential there to access. There's so much of that in this world that like we don't know about and we're not able to tap into. And when we do, when we are able to, it's not only a reflection on our own spiritual selves, but it's also a gift, right? In any spiritual experience, in Shabbos, and anything we do, saying a blessing, it's not like sometimes we'll feel it and sometimes we won't, right? Taking time to pray. Sometimes you might be in the mood for it and sometimes you're not. And when you're not and you don't feel it, it's just as important. But it's whether we actually like feel the satisfaction and the connection from it is a gift. Whereas going to Israel and going to the Kotel and doing these things, you're spiritually gaining from it either way, whether you feel it or not. And so to any spiritual things we do in our day-to-day lives here. But like, I don't know, it's amazing that like you could go and you feel it, but not everyone can always do that.
Yeah, I don't take that for granted. The first time we ever went as kids, we asked my uncle, we're like, Uncle, what do we do at the wall? Like, what do we do there? He's like, you paint it. Really? Like, no.
And you believed him.
We believed him. We believed him. We didn't know what to do at the wall. Like, it wasn't something we immediately felt, and not everyone feels it, and that's important to point out. Right? Mm-hmm. And I was blessed to feel it, certainly mostly the first time. And when there, it's like just, we believe that God's presence is still there. After the destruction of the temple, his presence never left that space. And when I was there, it just was like an opportunity to talk to God and ask him for everything we need, right? And that's what prayer is like, it helps you understand, like, what do I need and what do I want and what's important? And like, it can be extremely emotional. And it was just like, it's like, I feel like there's a lot to catch up on. And yes, I talk to God every day, 3 times a day and beyond in my regular prayers, but like there, just the closeness feels a little different. And like, I remember last year when we went in May, after praying there for a half hour, I was like, I think it's literally worth coming to Israel once a year, all the time and expense, just to go to the Western Wall once and come back. Like, it could be a 2-day trip, a 3-day trip. Like, it's worth it, the way I view it.
Shout out to Lily and Omer for getting married there. So
yes, big shout. Thank you. Anyone else wants to get married there, we'd like to come. So please do that. So yeah, it's very, very special spiritually. And it gives, in life is filled with ebbs and flows of inspiration. And we need reboots, right? We need to refuel. And for me, this trip accomplished that in a major way. Every time I go there, definitely accomplishes that. So that was very enriching experience. One interesting thing that just came to mind as you were talking about, sometimes we feel it when we pray or we don't feel it. It reminds me a little bit of, we went to a class in Aish in Jerusalem from Rabbi Dov Ber Cohen, who's a tremendous speaker. We hope to bring him out here at some point, please God.
He has a great book on Amazon. What's it called again? Empowering Mastering Life.
Look him up, Dov Ber Cohen. It was like a meditation workshop for an hour. It was awesome. And one thing he said that stuck with me big time is like, your experience in life will be determined by what's in your thoughts, what's going on in your head, in your mind. If you have negative thoughts and anxious thoughts and sad thoughts and depressing thoughts, you will be depressed and miserable. And if you have happy thoughts and grateful thoughts and appreciative thoughts, you will be happy.
With the same reality.
Yeah.
Wow. So our situation doesn't then determine our happiness in life. Like, two people could be, I don't know, in the same life situation. I mean, it's
Yeah,
always different
totally.
per person, but like, one person can be in one life situation, and through their thoughts, you're saying they can see the good in it and be grateful
Right.
for what they have.
Yeah, they can have an entirely different experience than the other person in the exact same situation. Because this guy's thinking how great it is, and this guy's thinking how miserable it is. And that's an important thing to realize. And he said that if you were going on a road trip and they were playing on the music on the radio, it was like the worst song, just like horrible song, awful. So you have a choice when you're driving. You can leave it on and become miserable and depressed, or you can turn it down or change the channel. And like in life, a lot of times we're going through life with horrible thoughts and a horrible radio station playing, horrible music playing in our heads.
Or phrases like
or
blaming, right?
Perceptions.
Blaming ourselves.
Yeah. And too often we don't turn it down. We don't turn it off. Like we can, but we don't.
Yeah.
So the point of this meditative kind of workshop we did with him was like, learn how to turn it down. Turn down that voice and those thoughts.
So through meditation, you're learning to control your thoughts.
Right. Yeah? And we did kind of classic like breathing meditation, just focusing on your breath. And, you know, we did one meditation just focusing on the sound around you, which is awesome. And I think that's a really powerful lesson is in life, that sometimes we need to just quiet the noise. And especially in the world we live in today with social media and constant barrage of stuff coming our way, we don't need to receive it. We can tone it down. And one takeaway I actually did from Israel was, when I was in Israel, a few times I did look at Twitter and I was reminded of all the doom and gloom. Like when I was in Israel, apparently one day there were 200 rockets sent to Lebanon. Wow. And I didn't know that. I had no idea, but only because I looked at Twitter, like I realized, well, there's 200 rockets, and it's good to know what's going on. True. But like, it just showed me like whenever I opened up Twitter in Israel, like it felt like the world was caving in. And so one of the takeaways I came back with is like, I took off Twitter from my phone when I got back to America, because it's not all doom and gloom. And I need to turn down some of that noise.
So I was just looking up. I recently heard Dove Bear interviewed on a podcast, and he has his own podcast too, which
that's what I would listen to.
Cool. I found it today when I was searching for the other podcasts. He also, Master Your Life with Rabbi Dove Bear Cohen, I think he also mentioned on this other podcast he has an online course. So if anyone's interested in more of this meditation type stuff,
definitely check him out.
Yeah. DOVBER Cohen, COHEN. And he has his own podcast. You could look for him, and books, and a meditation course.
Yeah. Cool. So, so I mean, just to what you were asking earlier is like the different, like, why was this trip so rich? What were the highlights? So went over kind of the food highlight, went over the spiritual highlight, the spiritual aspect of it. I think just two other things, or maybe they're connected, that really stood out to me was, one of my goals in going there was just to be there, I had a strong desire to just like hug my cousins who were in Gaza, fighting in Gaza. And I had a strong desire to, see people affected by this. And so in addition to being able to talk to my cousins a lot, which is very special, I was also able, we went down to the Nova site, and it was pretty wild at the Nova site. We heard explosions in the distance, and at the site there's memorials of everyone who was who was murdered there. And around one of them was a family who was taking pictures with the picture. The man's name was Mort Trabelsi, of blessed memory, who was murdered there. And I asked one of the young men who was taking pictures there, I asked, like, was this person a family member of yours? And he said, yeah, this was my brother. And I immediately started crying, and I gave him a hug. Hopefully he's okay hugging a stranger.
Oh, family.
Oh, family. And I said, I want you to know, like, we're thinking about you every day. You know, in America, in the diaspora, like, and I was crying. I couldn't say anything. And then we got a group, and we had them tell his story a little bit. And this man Moore was married 1 month prior. And late in the night of that Friday night, they decided to come down to the music festival. And they arrived at 6 a.m. So they were there for a half hour before it all went haywire. And he was one of the first people who tried to escape, and he was gunned down on that road trying to escape. And so that was very special and powerful to give him a hug and to hear that story, to hear about this person whose life was ruined and cut short. His wife survived, but it was very powerful to see that. It's also powerful at the Nova site, just down the road a little bit. They've collected all the cars, and a friend of mine noticed, you know, whereas in Holocaust museums you see all the shoes, at this site you see all the cars.
Can you explain the cars? Like what cars are these?
Yeah, so these were the cars of the people who were, one, at the Nova Festival, who were murdered trying to escape, or they were burned alive. And people who were on this road were gunned down, were lit on fire, burned. There were tremendous ashes inside these cars that were removed of human remains. And they memorialized these cars by stacking them together, by keeping them at this site nearby the Nova site. And a bunch of them are burned beyond recognition. I mean, just completely just torched. A bunch of them are ridden with bullets. You still see the bullet holes. And then a whole lot of them are actually parked. And if you wouldn't know better, if someone just dropped you there at this site, you would think that you just were dropped at like a baseball game. And now you're in the parking lot of the baseball game. Because you look at these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cars, you realize that it's not a baseball game. These are people who are never coming back with those cars. And it was very profound. It was interesting being at this historical site that people will flock to for years to come, and being at this historical site and not really learning much, because I know this isn't history for us.
We've been reading the news every day.
This is something we've been living through,
yeah,
and reading about every day. And it was kind of interesting to be at like almost like a Holocaust memorial, but we lived it. We saw it. We read about it in the news. So yeah, it was very, very profound, very powerful to be there for that, and to see that, and to be able to give that person a hug, and to be able to tell a story. A lot of stories like that. You know, we saw the bomb shelter where, you saw these bomb shelters along the road where people hid and grenades were thrown in there. There's a guy named Aner who kept throwing out. We saw the shelter where he threw out the grenades to the terrorists, and eventually it got him. I think that's where Hirsch Goldberg was kidnapped, from that bomb shelter.
These are bomb shelters near the festival?
Near the festival on the road, because it's near Gaza, there's shelters everywhere which shield you from these rockets. So the people hid in them from the terrorists, the terrorists threw in grenades and killed them and murdered them.
It's such a crazy reality that, like, because there's a place in Israel and it's near Gaza, which was land that we gave back. Like, they used to be Israeli land, right? We gave it back. And anyone who's near there, like, here's this Azar Music Festival site, there has to be bomb shelters, because of course it's a reality that there's rockets coming over any time from this land, which was a gift.
Right.
Like, Way to
We
think you're...
were told at the orientation, if the siren goes off and you're outside, just hit the deck, lay down, cover your head, and lay as flat as you can. Don't be like a ball, because then there's more mass of you. Just lay flat down, then there's less of you that could get hit. And it's just a reminder that our enemies are launching rockets at civilian centers, at people, at innocent people. All innocent civilians is who they're launching rockets at. And that seems to get lost in the translation here. But yeah, it was a very, very serious, powerful day, and something that was one of the reasons I wanted to go, was to see it, because people are denying it, despite the fact that Hamas taped it as they did these atrocities. People still deny, and so I felt it was very important to see it, so that I can share with anyone who will listen about the truth of what happened.
Did you go into the kibbutzes at all? Or?
So apparently in the early days, the kibbutzes were open to go through, but then more recently they've been closed because a lot of the people haven't returned yet to their homes. So it just seems a little inappropriate to let people kind of tour around as a tourist site when the people aren't back living there yet.
Private homes with their private stuff,
right?
Whatever's left of
it.
Right. That's too. And there's still survivors.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't see inside the kibbutzes. Although one of my cousins was in the kibbutzes on October 8th, clearing out the terrorists from them, and the things he saw and said are just too much to bear.
Yeah. Is there anything you can share you have these 4 cousins who are all doing different things and involved in Gaza.
Yeah. One thing that's amazing for one is just the feeling of total responsibility they have to be there and to be present and to defend our country. One of my cousins was in Guatemala on vacation with his wife, and he moved heaven and earth to get back to Israel as soon as he could to join his unit. He's living his life, a college student, and he's in reserve duty. He's not in the active military, but he needed to get back, and that was a priority for him.
And his wife also,
they're all totally on board. Yeah. Another cousin is a combat medic who recently agreed to keep going, even though they're like, you're getting kind of older, you don't need to do this. And he's like, no, I'm going to keep doing it. So he is still in a serious role in his reserve duty. And yeah, one thing they said, which was very depressing and very hard, I think, for a Western mind to fathom, was that, in going around Gaza, and they were in many, many, many homes in Gaza, in pretty much every home they were in, they saw Hamas paraphernalia. They saw manuals for how to harm Israelis, how to hurt and kill Israelis. They saw flags and posters of terrorists. They saw weapons stashes under cribs in the children's rooms. They saw this everywhere. It wasn't in a couple houses. And sadly, I think a lot of us want to believe this narrative. And maybe like in Iran, you have a great people who have been hijacked by a murderous terrorist government. And we want to believe that the people of Gaza have been hijacked by this horrible terrorist government, Hamas, and none of them really support them. But it doesn't seem to be the reality, which is hard for us to fathom and to grasp. But we remember that Hamas was democratically elected. Until this day, even after October 7th and all the carnage of Gaza, they enjoy widespread support among the Gazan civilians. So we hear this idea of all these just Hamas-hating innocent civilians out there. In reality, they're terrorist-supporting people. It's the civilians who are often watching they're enslaving Israeli hostages. Just the civilians. No, those are not civilians. Those are terrorists. And I heard this not just from cousins, but I heard this from a lot of people in Israel, that they've seen this, and it's a very sad reality that our Western minds cannot fathom and don't want to accept. It's hard to hear.
The only way I've been thinking about that also, how to process it. I want to ask, how can it be? How is it possible that you have these, I don't know how many people living there, and it's just so, at least majority like this?
Yeah.
We see in the schools there, right? The schools, it seems like it's almost been like training grounds in Gaza for like the most extreme haters of the West. Like, go there to get your training, to teach your kids, their
complete
ideologies.
Complete indoctrination. And I don't know how to undo that. And it's scary and it's sad. And they grow up with this horrible kind of victim mentality of like, we've been so wronged. And, they still have these things called refugee camps where they grow up. And my grandmother in Gaza and in the West Bank, like there's a lot of these refugee camps out there. Now, they're not actually refugee camps. They're proper like cities and apartments and whatever. They call them refugee camps. And my grandmother, by contrast, was in a displacement camp after the Holocaust. But I didn't grow up in a displacement camp, right? It was not to compare at all what happened to each of the sides, but like she picked up like what happened to me is the worst thing you could possibly imagine could happen to any human being. Lost her entire family, but she picked up eventually and started her life. The fact that there's people living in refugee camps 80 years after they were displaced from their homes, sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly, blows the mind. And it's hard to fathom. Yeah.
It's like we were talking about before, like that victim mentality.
Right.
And when you have a whole people living with that victim mentality and you're able to keep them in that mindset, then it's just, I don't know, it's very different. It's not empowering, right? Like it's the total opposite.
Right. Exactly. Stuck in where they are, helpless, no way out other than to terrorize Jews.
Therefore, you need to find someone to blame.
Right. And the Jew is the one to blame, as the Jew has been throughout history. So, yeah, so that was a very powerful experience. And maybe one of the last things that just comes to mind is just being struck by the awesome unity of what I saw in Israel. There are two instances that kind of stick out. The first one was on Friday night at the Western Wall. So I've been to the Western Wall on Friday night many times. I know you mentioned earlier the spiritual significance, and maybe our avos or imahos, our foremothers and forefathers are there. But I've been there many times, and usually it's such what we call a chavaya, such a scene. I connect to it, but I don't connect to it like emotionally. Like it's great to be there, but like I don't connect emotionally to it.
Like you feel the ruach,
the buzz, and the energy, which is awesome. But it's usually like it's a lot. Mm-hmm. But on this trip, as I was sitting there and we're singing Yiddi Nefesh, and I'm sitting and I'm looking in front of me, and there's a soldier next to a guy with a strimal, a chassid, next to a guy with a kippah sruga, a white knit yarmulke, next to a guy without a yarmulke, next to a guy with a black yarmulke, next to a guy with a black hat. Everyone on the Jewish spectrum together, dancing together at the Western Wall on Friday night. Like, I started crying. I started crying. Because I believe in my heart that when we're not united, that's when we're the most vulnerable. That's when our enemies pounce on us. And that's what happened on October 7th. We were so divided before then. And to see that gives me hope. Because I believe that unity is the only solution for us, the only answer for us. And I thought that was awesome. And it drew an emotional response in a way that I haven't had on a Friday night at the Kotel.
Wow. Can I just elaborate on that? It's such a powerful point and experience that you had that I just have learned about that. Like in the Megillah for Purim, it talks about how the Jews were mifuzar, that we were all spread out. And I heard that reference is that we weren't united. And it was specifically then when we weren't united that Haman said, now it's time. Haman said, now's the time to attack the Jews because they're not united. And also we see even further back in the periods of the kings in Israel, go back to the times of, the very beginning in Israel, or not the very beginning, but when there were Jewish kings there in the times of the Tanakh. And there's all these stories about even when the Jews were all sinning and worshiping idols, when we were united, the nations around us couldn't harm us. They couldn't touch us. It was a time even when the people were righteous, if we were fighting within each other, that's also when we were vulnerable to our enemies. It's this this theme of this unity, this achdus that's like, I mean, we just see it throughout history and still to today.
Yeah.
That's just so powerful how you're able to experience it.
Yeah, and we're about to, again, this coming Tuesday, we're starting the 3 weeks leading up to the destruction of the Second Temple, in which we have this horrible period of mourning where men don't shave their beards, as we said, and we have all these restrictions. We don't listen to live music. We have these acts of mourning, and the reason is because the Second Temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred. Right? We're still in this exile because of baseless hatred, and every generation the temple is not rebuilt. It's because it's as if we destroyed it, the Talmud says. And it stands to reason that's because of this baseless hatred. So we have to combat that with every fiber of our being.
So if we're one big dysfunctional family, I guess it gets to that point sometimes where we're just a little too dysfunctional, that it's not, it crosses a line. Maybe, I wonder if in honor of the 3 weeks, wouldn't it be so nice if there was some sort of like campaign, if every Jew could just reach out to another who doesn't look like you, who's not in your inner circle, like just in some form of connection, whether it's like saying shalom on the street or inviting over, getting a coffee and having a conversation or something. Wouldn't that be so nice? Like such unity, because there is such diversity within Judaism of there's so many different types of Jews, people doing different things and living different ways, and to the extent we can reconnect to each other and embrace each other, despite all those differences, we're one family.
Totally. And especially now as we're approaching an election, and a lot of us have different perspectives on politics, but whether the person is to our left or whether they're to our right, we need to respect them and not vilify people we disagree with. So yeah, I think it'd be great. Then along those lines, which was just the second moment that really struck me almost in an emotional way, was on our last night in Israel. We were getting ready to go to watch some soccer and to drink and celebrate our trip. And on the way in Kikar Tzion, in Zion Square, on Ben Yehuda Street, near where it intersects Jaffa Street, was a street performer. And the guy was singing a song called Achenu. For those who don't know, Achenu means our brothers. And the words of the song are like, all of our brothers, we're all brothers. And for those who are in distress, for those who are in captivity, we trust that Hashem will save you. And we're all together. We're one. And this guy's singing this. And I'm looking around, and there's a circle gathered of 100 Israelis and tourists. And the most secular Jews, people who are not wearing much clothing, next to women in long skirts and head coverings and tichels, and then there's guys with black velvet yarmulkes like mine. There's people with no yarmulkes. There's dark Sephardic people. There's light Ashkenazic people. 100 some odd people together in a circle, encircling this guy as he's singing the song about unity. How Hashem should deliver hostages from our enemies' hands. And that gave me hope. That gave me a lot of hope to see that, because people, I think, even though they disagree, I think they still get it. And they understand how vital it is that we respect each other and we love each other, even if we disagree. And I thought that was a very hopeful message that I took with me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So intense.
Yeah.
So our 30 to 40-minute conversation.
Yeah, I guess it went longer than we planned.
But thank you for sharing every piece of it. Really, so impactful. We get a little window into your experience.
Yeah, and shameless plug, we're hoping to do this again in December. So if you're listening to this and you want to come, please message us and we can help. Hopefully we can, God willing, take you, and that would be a really great thing.
Any last words, takeaways? What do you think is what should be the number one takeaway from this?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the one takeaway is that we are, I think kind of maybe what we left off with is that we are one. We are one. We're one. And we need to love each other. We need to stick together. And I think that's very important. If you take nothing else from my trip, take that. I felt that very profoundly. And then also we need to do what we can to turn down the noise. And this is what I've done since I got back, is again, no more Twitter on my phone. It's often worse on Twitter than it is in real life. And we can make ourselves unwell due to the consumption of the media that we consume. Reality is different. Like I said, it felt safer there than here. It felt great to be there. And as soon as I ever turned on my phone, it looked scary and awful. But it wasn't. And I think we have to take steps to take care of our well-being and our mental health. At a time like now, we have to really look out for ourselves and turn down that noise. So those are maybe two of the takeaways.
Wow. I love it. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Stay tuned for more episodes coming out now that I'm back and out of this jet lag cycle. We do hope to start releasing episodes once a week as we've done. And stay tuned. Please like and subscribe and share with friends and share any feedback as well. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks.